2025 Ironman 70.3 Gulf Coast. This is happening on May 10th, 2025. Quick note, athlete guide not up yet, but we're going to crack on anyway. This is 90% sold out, so you can still register today as of 4/2. This is an ocean swim, flat bike, and a flat run. Air temperature, you're right around the 80-degree mark, lows 65, so somewhere in there I would side on the higher side here. Average water temp is about 71 here. It's exactly what you get here. Some years you get wetsuits, some years you don't. It's just kind of up in the air what the weather is doing. But great representation of what you're going to get on race day and maybe a little bit extra, which we will dive into. So event schedule here. This is last updated on the 21st of January this year. I believe that these things are going to start to get updated a little more frequently here in the next week or two, specifically with the athlete guide that will be released. We're going to be referencing last year's guide because it still has useful information in it. Thursday, May 8th, athlete check-in does kick off 2 to 7 p.m. Edgewater Conference Center. It's all located there. Village is open at the same time. Athlete briefings 3 and 5 p.m. Friday, May 9th, check-in 9 to 4 p.m. We also have mandatory bike and timing chip pickup happening from 10 to 5 p.m. Athlete briefings happen at 11, 1, and 3. Saturday is the big day, 4:30 to 5:30. That's when the transition area is open. Race starts at 5:40 a.m. and that is not a typo. Athlete post-race food, all that good stuff starts from 9 and ends at 4. Bike and gear checkout. I believe the last time you can do that is 5 p.m. Awards slots. This one happens at 3 p.m. Since it is a little bit earlier, you get a little bit earlier awards slot there. So if you are looking to make that slot, that is the time. Make sure you don't miss it there. Heading over to our wind finder. This is where our race is located here. This is what the wind is typically doing out there, but that doesn't mean that is always the case. You can see here that it changes a little bit day to day, and with some extremes coming up here and also here. A couple of situations. This is where you're going to be swimming. You'll bike out, you'll bike up, down, back around, and you're running back through here. The wind is going to play a big factor on race day. You can see that when the water is, obviously it's going to be a little higher in the 20s, and as you get further off of land, the wind does dive down and it becomes less of a factor. But you are going to have to come back in on the bike, so you will be going away from strong winds, and then you'll feel good. You turn around, and the winds will slowly start to pick up, depending on how fast you're going, as you get closer to the shore. Again, that's not always the case. You could see in some of the later dates here that it does do different things here, so make sure you are keeping an eye on the weather, and that is going to play, that's going to have some strategy implications for your race, no matter who you are. Pulled up a cool little chart here. This is going to be, let's highlight it for you. This is going to be where we are racing right up in here. This is an oil spill that happened in 2010. You can see that they mapped out what the directions of the oil spill did. Again, this is our area that we are racing right up here. The direction goes this way, so from, what is that, southwest to northeast, but then it does curl around a little bit, and we do have a little bit of a circle here. A cyclone, they call them eddies. So just because the water is overarchingly going one way doesn't mean that that is always the case, which is going to create some issues for you on race day. Going to our course overviews here. This is our swim course right here. Again, weather, the wind, or the wind, the water could be going this way, or a combination of ways. If the wind is going this direction and the water is going this direction, you are going to have some white caps out there. You're going to have some rough water conditions out there. If things do line up, it's going to be a little smoother out there. Make sure you are keeping track in the days leading up to it. If you do arrive 2 or 3 days in advance, what you should be doing is traveling to, if you have the ability to, traveling to the race site or somewhere close to it, and just watching the water for a couple of minutes and seeing what's happening out there. Realize that what is happening here, it's going to be a little different than what's happening out there. It's ocean currents, what you want. You can kind of see it in some of the pictures out here, but on race day start, hopefully they put you in kind of a rip current area so that it throws you really far out. Of course, on course, but what you really want to do is you want to find some of those areas to shoot you out, and that's going to increase your swim capabilities drastically out there. One of the worst things you can do is find one of the areas where it's sucking you back in and you are fighting that on the way out. Typically what happens out here is you have a really good time on the way out, you turn and it gets a little harder and you struggle on the way back in. Of course, that can be the opposite there. But again, make sure you are watching the water, you're aware of what's happening on race morning and the days leading up to it for some race cues. And again, just like on the bike, which we're going to address in a second, that will change how you attack what's out there. If the water is pulling you out, what everyone really loves to do is fly out here, and because you're going faster, the natural instinct is to go even faster and faster and faster. And what a lot of people end up doing is overdoing it on the way out, and the way back in is tough, but they make it harder on themselves than it has to be because they really, really enjoyed themselves on the way out. So when you're out there in the water and on race morning, make sure you are aware of what's happening. It's really easy to get sucked in. This is usually an early season race for a lot of people, so they're not in kind of that race mode yet. They forget the normal way of doing things. So when you're out right about halfway here, make sure you do check in with yourself and say, hey, is this pace realistic? And if the water is pushing you out and you say, hey, I'm having a great time out here and I'm, swimming a little hard, but it's doable, then you're probably at the right place. If you find yourself saying, hey, this is a little difficult out here and we're in the easy section, then you need to pull it back a little bit, and that can be really hard on race day. When you do get out in this area over here, a lot of athletes struggle with sighting, so some of our stronger indoor swimmers might struggle during this section here. It's totally natural and normal. If that is you, make sure you're sighting off of other people, or if there's a boat out there, if there's someone helping people, make sure you're sighting off of them, or sighting off of those buoys. As you start to make that turn back in, this is where the stronger swimmers are going to pull away from you, and it's just going to be natural. If they are putting the hammer down on top of that, it's going to be very challenging for weaker swimmers to kind of hang on. And again, this is another area where those mid-pack swimmers kind of fall into a trap of those stronger mid-pack swimmers. On the way back in, the water direction could be pushing you this way, could be pushing that way. If you are getting pushed this way, obviously you want to sight a little further off to the side so you naturally swim down straight. What a lot of people do is they sight straight down here and they end up getting pushed over here and they have to correct, and then going over here and correcting. And a lot of people zigzag on the way back in and make it a lot harder than it needs to be for this course. So be smart out there. Make sure your sighting patterns are there. Make sure that you're also, if possible, once you get the patterns of the waves out there, make sure you're trying to sight off the top of those waves. A lot of people try to sight in the valleys out here and they have a really hard time. They have to get themselves really far out of the water, and they don't know where they're going because they're sighting at the wrong times out there. So swimming's a timing sport, and it's just going to be even more of a timing thing out there. Feel the water and you will have success. As you get out of the water here, you have a sand exit, which means you're going to have all kinds of stuff in your legs and your toes. If you do have the ability to hit one of the pools or one of the water things out there, if they are out there, that would be great, great, great for you. It just eliminates blisters. For me, I just feel a little bit better on the bike and the run if I do that. And that is our swim. Weather's going to be a huge factor. Watch those currents, ride the waves, swim your swim. The bike. If you haven't been on the new Ironman site, this is what they're doing now. Strava enabled here, which is awesome. It's a one-loop course. This is our start and finish spot in the same place. You're going to start out over here, hook up. You're going to go almost all the way up to that freeway up there, looping back down over here. There is a unique section here. And you are going to take a right-hand turn. You're going to go off a little man-made path here. There's going to be little plywood markers out here. You're just going to go right over those. Might be potentially flat zone area here, so just make sure you are conscientious of that. I think this part's really cool, but some athletes don't like that. But that's another cool feature of this race. It's not really a road, you're just running over some plywood. Anyone that's done Atlantic City before it was Ironman branded will know exactly what I'm talking about. Before we go too deep into that, we're going to go back up to our wind finder here. And again, weather is going to play a huge impact. When we talk about our day today, we are going to assume that the weather is going to go from southeast to northwest. But again, that could totally change. It could totally be different, and that's going to have huge impacts in there. We will address that briefly, but not entirely. So watch the weather and plan accordingly. Normally, weather it's going to do something like this, like we just said, which means it's going to throw you back out. You're going to have a tough stretch where you come back in to town. And then again along the water, which you will see in a second. So again, watch the weather, be mindful. But if it is doing something like this, that's going to change what you're doing on race day. Also, if it's doing something like this, that's going to also change what you are doing. Plan ahead. At last year's athlete guide here. The water stops. We had one here. This is our first one. Had the second one halfway back right here. And the third water stop happened right here on race day, right around mile 44, 45, somewhere in there. So that is just for point of reference. I can't tell you where the penalty tent was last year, so should be a question you ask when you do check in at your athlete check-in is where that penalty tent is, just in case you do pick up a drafting penalty. And if not, you're hitting the transition area and getting the spot in there. So it's really good to note where all that cool stuff is. Going back to our course overview here. If we go back to our little profile that we've created, this is our power plan. As we roll over here, I will scroll down just a little bit so you can see the entirety of the course. Watch what happens with our rider over here. You're going to see exactly what we just said. As we roll out of town, have a little bit of a tailwind before it switches over to a cross tailwind, and that's going to pretty much last until we get all the way up to our turnaround. When we do hit the turnaround, it's going to obviously swoop back around, and it's going to be a little bit of a battle coming back into town. Hanging a right, couple of rights and a left. We're going to keep that trajectory going. We're going to go away from the transition area. We're going to be greeted with a nice tailwind. This is always a fan favorite section here. Athletes are going to be flying normally. And then when we do our loop-de-loop, things do change a little bit when we're along the coast, and we do get a nice headwind all the way back in. So that weather-wise, when we first start out at this point of the race, wind speed is about 20 miles an hour. Once we get a little further up the road here, right around that turnaround, again, still having a 7 mile an hour, 8 mile an hour wind. As we progress down through here, you can see that is largely the same. And as we get closer to the water, it picks up again to about 12 miles an hour, and that is consistent to the finish line. Again, could be slightly different. We are a little bit of a ways out. This is the beginning of April here when we are creating this video, so anything could happen. Hopefully what you are seeing in this race little thing here is section 1, section 2, section 3. Said another way, your power is just going to slightly increase as you get out there. That is by design. For a course like this in these ideal conditions. Again, if it's a little bit different, your power is going to change here. This athlete is shooting for about a 240 out on race day. If they're really good, it's going to be around a 240, maybe slightly slower. They're going to be averaging about 270 watts this race since it is a little bit flatter than most. Aero is going to be a huge priority on race day. Going back to the course profile on the official Ironman site. I break this down into a couple different sections out here. First section is here. Second section, we have a slight gradient lifted up here. As we roll over the terrain, you can kind of see where that puts you on the map. This slow little, what was that, upgrade? That is going to take you almost to the top of the turnaround. We do have a little bit of a mix in through here, and when we do have the turnaround, we do turn around. You're going to experience the next little section for us, which is that slight downhill section, which is a big trap on race day, followed by number 4 and number 5. And the reason I don't put these two in the same area is because one is going out. You usually have a tailwind, and it's another big happy section. And this way back in is usually a huge sufferfest. You have view of the ocean right there. If it's a great day, it looks great, it's awesome, but you'll see a lot of athletes suffering during that section. So that's why I split that up. Going back to our software over here, I'm going to hide the elevation so we can look at speed here for a second. Speed's going to be higher on the way out purely because of that wind. Aero, again, major priority. If we bring that elevation back, you can see this, we are going to 81 feet of elevation from about, let's call it 30 feet of elevation. These huge spikes, the blue right here, these huge spikes in the blue is not an accident. That is just the bridge. Great photos every year on there. You can expect someone to be out there taking photos again this year, guarantee it. Um, as we go to our time analysis here, time analysis here, we always increase the power first. If you increase it just slightly, you're going to net about 37 seconds, a little faster. Drag on this course, if you decrease it a little bit, you are going to net yourself 30 seconds. So very, very similar results there. Rolling resistance, if you improve that, you're going to save about 5 seconds there. So if it was me on this course, I would be focusing on increasing my power and decreasing my drag slightly. Just from this simple upgrade here, we have almost 2 minutes of savings, and depending on what the weather does, that can, just get more and more and more. Increasing things, I want to just touch upon the weight here. So our weight, this athlete's 150 pounds. If we decrease that by one pound, you're going to save a whopping 6 seconds on this course. If you increase that, you're going to lose about 8 seconds over this course. That is just for the 149-pound athlete. So on this course, aero is the main priority. Aero is going to get you the most benefit out here, along with some of those power increases, obviously. The athletes out here that are going to struggle if the wind is really, really high are the lighter athletes, believe it or not. The athletes that aren't, built like the super featherlight riders, featherlight hill climbers of cycling, those athletes are going to find a lot of success on this course, and it's going to come a little bit more natural to them. So when you are, in those packs, if you are vying for those slots and there's people around you, realize that the games on this course, they can still last outside of the swim, some of those mental games, and you can find yourself on the wrong side of, burning some of those matches if you're not careful. So know who you are as a rider and an athlete and execute that plan out there. Better swimmers on this course are probably, their plan is going to be to crush the swim, crush the bike, hang on for the run. Those runners out here are probably going to struggle a little bit more on this course just because they're likely going to struggle on the swim. Their bike, they're going to kind of lose a little more time or hold the time, and then the run is, game on for them. But it just depends on how much time you lose on a course like this. So again, know yourself as the athlete and know how to attack this on race day. Zones for this race course, zones are pretty just right in one zone. I mean, we do have a couple seconds in the others. That's likely due to the bridge over here. But here's how I would attack this course in this scenario of the weather going from that southeast all the way up to that northwest side. For those compass deficient, that's this direction over here. So beginning of our course on the way out here. And we can go to the new course profile for everyone here. So on the way out up here, I would use this as a time to have your speed super high. Aero should still be a priority, but don't be afraid to get out of that aero position, stomp on the pedals, and that's actually going to be key to your success here on this course. Fueling should start pretty much immediately out here. That ocean swim's likely going to take a little bit more out of you than should be or normally does. And again, if it's hotter conditions than what you've been doing, which is likely most of us at this point in the year, that's only going to exacerbate things a little bit more. So start fueling early and often. This section on the way back in is likely going to be the most difficult section here. Aero is going to be the main priority. Again, your power is going to be slightly higher here. And again, aero is huge during this section here. The athletes that have overdone it on the way out and really, really focused on hitting that turnaround as fast as possible, they're likely going to pay the price on the way back in. That is going to be your opportunity to close the gap a little bit, but not entirely if you have slipped a lot of time away. What athletes really struggle with is landing from the turnaround back to this point in time here. They really want to close the gap with everyone that left them in the dust, and that is a fool's errand because you're likely not going to be able to do that. Another huge point of contention is this area to that little section of plywood that we talked about earlier. This is a faster section, so don't expect to keep mowing down individuals if your plan is this. All right. A lot of people, their speed's super high up here, and they forget that everyone else's speed is super high up here. So enjoy this speed because you do have longer than you want to on the way back in. Experienced a lot of headwinds. You're going to probably experience a lot of crosswinds out here. Watch what the wind is doing for people in front of you, and get ready to react to that. If you are feeling strong once you do hit that turn point here, um, you're going to be really, really good at catching a lot of people. You're going to be a lot better off than most. Once you hit the main highway here, the main point there on the way back in, you really need to think about, hey, should I start shutting things down or push into the finish line? If you're having the best day of your life, you can continue that onwards. But if you're not, which is almost everyone on race day here, you need to start thinking about shutting things down a little bit, getting the last food into your system, as aggressively as you can on the bike, and getting ready for the run, which is our next attack point here. So scrolling into from our last athlete guide here. One last thing before we do that, make sure you do read the new rules this year. If you haven't raced already or you've been living under a rock, they have changed. Make sure you also are looking at your run shoes and if they are race legal. Make sure you check the links on the race website. But this is our run course this year. This is 3 laps, same run course as last year. Again, you look at the pictures from the main landing page, it's exactly what it is on there. So you're going to have a little bit of everything out here. You're going to have coastal running, you're going to have some neighborhoods, you're going to have a cool little surprise that I won't spoil for everyone, but you're going to have a lot of cool stuff out here. We have our one loop of our course here. You can see it's about 4.7 miles long. This is about 50 feet of elevation. You take that out a little bit because at the very end and on their run course, they have about 100 feet of elevation gain here for the 3 loops, and you could see exactly what it is. It's pretty flat out here on race day, but there is a couple of nuances that you do need to know about. First off, when you get onto the run, this is a really common race for athletes to flame out on the runs because it's really hot, they haven't prepared for it, or it's just their first bigger race of the season and they've overdone the bike without realizing it. A lot of nutritional issues stem from the bike at this race. Because if you look at this flat profile, you'll say, hey, this is nothing crazy. I could do this in my sleep. Let's crush this. And you do the first loop, and then you cramp up. You start overpacing. Bad things happen. You haven't fueled. You haven't drank anything. It's a nightmare out here. It can be awesome, or it can be terrible. Chafing is probably going to happen if you haven't sprayed yourself off from the swim in some of the most obvious spots. Some of the non-obvious spots are your armpits and chest area. That is another place where you can just keep splashing water on, just get that salt water off of you, and that will help. If you have started chafing, there's not a whole lot you can do about it in the moment. It's already too late by the time it starts happening. Once you get out onto the run, immediately what you should start thinking about is nutrition, pacing, fueling, everything that you happened on the bike, and how you're feeling out there on the first mile or so. This is a race where I wouldn't totally floor it on the first mile. When you do get out there, you're going to run straight, run under, and you're going to hang a left-hand turn. You're going to make some zigzags out here. It's going to be a little bit busy for our first mile or so, and then things do start clearing up after that. Hanging a couple of right-hand turns over here. You're going to run through the water park at 1.2 miles. This is always most people's favorites out here. And then the stimulation kind of ends after you get out beyond that at about 1.6, 1.7 miles. Then you can see in front of you, you can see the straight lines, you can see the heat, you can see all kinds of fun stuff. You're open to the elements, and the list goes on and on and on. So be careful out here. What athletes really run into is they run these zigzags, they hit the water park, they're feeling good, and they try to continue that momentum, and they're running out of their element, and what usually happens right around here is the big I think I've overdone things, or I just need to walk for a second and just I'm going to get back to it. Be careful of that water park feeling. I would not sprint through it if you're feeling like, wow, I'm having a great day in the water park. Alarm bells should be going off. Be very, very careful out there on race day. When we do look at the profile, the course from last year, aid stations number 1, or right there, 2, 3, 4 on every loop. So you have 4 aid stations per loop. which means that there's ample opportunity to be fueling out there on race day. No real excuse. The nutrition is going to be listed out there for everyone. It's going to be pretty standard. Um, so once you do get to that coastal area, in my mind, the course is split up into a couple of areas. Section number one is obviously the sections that we just talked about over there. Section number two is the wraparound over here. Section number two, in my mind, is arguably harder than section number one, even though it is open to the elements and all that normal stuff. There's just lack of stimulation out there. Biggest thing that you're going to have motivation from are the crowds out there, and sometimes that's few and far between, especially along the beach street, beach road here. So when you're out there, I would play a couple of games with yourself. I would say, all right, I'm going to get to this street right here. I'm going to get to that street. I just have to get to this section. I just have to get to this section. And if you break it up into smaller sections, you can get some victories a little faster out there and get some of that motivation rolling out there. When athletes hit this corner here and they say, okay, I'm going to get as far as I can see way over there as fast as possible, that might work, but if it doesn't, that can have some negative consequences if you only get about halfway and then have to, get over the hump a little bit more. It's a three-loop course, so faster athletes are going to run into some lap traffic as you progress laps. Slower athletes are going to have the reverse. They're going to start out on a busier course, and as you progress further and further into your race, people are going to get less and less. Mid-pack athletes are going to have the best of both worlds, but there's going to be people all around you here. Make sure you are aware of the transition order of food and fuel and ice. If there is an ice station, ask where that is when you do check in. That can have major implications for your race as well. Chasing the ice is always a good strategy if it's a hotter day for you out there. What you should be doing right now to practice this, since it is a flatter race course, in my mind, what you should be doing is, doing some on-off, some intervals of your race-paced efforts after your bike sessions. That will definitely help. You can also do some thermal training out there relatively easily, especially now. It's April for most parts of the world, or excuse me, North America. It's a little bit easier to do that. But that's our 2025 race breakdown of 70.3 Gulf Coast here. If you have any questions, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, please reach out. I'll be happy to assist you in your racing journey. Good luck, everyone, on the 2025 edition.